Hello, all you beautiful building foundations of literacy people. Welcome to another installation of me talking to you about the major assignments for the classroom. I'm very excited. This video is designed to overview the last and probably most important of the assignments in the course. It is called Flipping the Classroom, Digital Literacy Lesson and Written Analysis. And so as you know, I've talked a little bit about this. I really enjoy doing teaching demonstrations in this course where you pair up literacy with your discipline to teach a lesson to your students who are also your peers, your classmates, okay? We'll talk a little bit about that. So the way we're going to do it this semester, because we're not obviously in the same physical space, is that we're going to take advantage of what's called asynchronous digital spaces. So it's it's as opposed to synchronous. So it's not live face-to-face. It's something where your students will be able to access your digital literacy lesson plan on their own time. They have about a week to complete it, and then we will talk about it after the week has gone by. Okay, so let's get into this lesson. This assignment has two component parts. So you've got number one is the digital literacy lesson itself that you're going to create for your students / peers and present to them. And then you have the subsequent written analysis. Now, a lot of you have never even taught before. So the burden of the grade is on the written analysis. The lesson plan itself can completely flop and it doesn't have anything to do with your grade. And so also it gives you a little breathing room to be a little more exploratory, etc. It's really the written analysis where you talk about the decisions you made and reflect on the lesson plan. That's where the onus of the grade is falling. So for the digital literacy lesson, you're going to create what's known as a flipped classroom experience for your students. This has grown in popularity, but basically this is a quote from Washington University to describe flipping the classroom, also known as inverting a classroom. It's a pedagogy-first approach to teaching in which course materials are introduced outside of class and then in class time is repurposed for inquiry, application, and assessment in order to better meet the needs of individual learners. So the idea here is quite simple. It's you're going to introduce a concept, have students do an activity, which they would do outside of classroom, and then when they come back to the classroom, since you've kind of flipped where some of the experience is, you actually just have more time to do a deep dive into what that activity was about and talking about inquiry, application, assessment, etc. Okay. One important thing to note, when you're conceptualizing about what you want your digital literacy lesson plan to look like, I really want you to think about it taking around 30 minutes to complete. So we'll probably have about 2 of these each week. And so I think having everyone complete 2 of them, that takes about an hour total if they're 30 minutes each, is a good amount of time. In general, it's always the case that people overplan how long something's going to take. So just keep it simple is my best advice. It usually takes much longer for students to complete something than you think it will, okay? So keep that in mind. Moving on, the digital lesson plan can take a variety of forms and structures, but the following is a good template to consider. I think most people are going to follow this very broad template that I'm about to describe, but I wanted to leave the door open to people being more creative if they feel that they want to and they have the experience, etc. Okay? So there's really sort of 3 parts to this. One, I'd like you to introduce your lesson and provide an overview of what you hope your students will learn, and I think this should be done using video of you talking to your students. You can use something like I'm using, which is called Loom, or you can use an actual just YouTube clip, however you want to do it, okay? So this would be a video of you talking to your students, and this lesson opening then would lead them into the activity or it could include the activity that you have planned for them to complete outside the classroom. Then the second step would be to have the students actually complete the activity you have designed to teach them an important aspect of your content area using literacy. So writing, reading are going to be probably the ones that are most focused on, but they don't have to be, because literacy, as we have talked about already briefly, involves communicative skills, including listening, viewing, and moving. You're not going to just choose one of these. I'm sure there'll be 2, 3, or 4 of these that you might be taking advantage of, but there's usually a focus that your lesson plan will take. Okay. Then I would like you need an assessment. This could be summative or formative. So summative is something where you're really trying to figure out what they've learned, and formative is where you're just trying to gain information about their thinking so far. Okay, summative is usually something that's graded, and formative is something that's informs your teaching. So you want to have something that students complete after or in concert with the activity you're designing that they can turn into you. I think this is an important part for the written analysis, because you want to have some sort of data that you've collected that you can analyze to the extent to which your learning goals and outcomes were met. Okay. So again, and I've got a star here. Your lesson plan must include a video of you speaking to your students. I think this is an important part because we're not in the classroom face to face, but I still want you to practice your classroom, or virtual classroom in this case, presentation skills. These are important skills to develop, and they really take practice. Okay, and you're at an education program at Hunter that is trying to get you as much practice as possible. So consider this a really wonderful place for you to practice. Okay, so again, I can envision you've got a video introducing what the lesson is about. Then you have students complete an activity, and part of that activity, or at the end of that activity, you have them create something that they then turn into you, so that you have data, assessment data, to think about the extent to which your goals and learning outcomes were met. Okay? And of course, we can talk about this more in class. This is where I'd pause and ask for questions, but can't quite do that. So some digital platforms for you to consider are Loom. This is the one you're looking at right now. Flipgrid is another one. I think that could be very useful. Adobe Spark, bookcreator.com, Mindomo, Prezi, and Padlet, of course, is one that you're somewhat familiar with now that we have it in our course. Okay. Finally, please use the Frankfurt Center, and I've put a link here for help, as they have a variety of resources available for teachers. Okay. So one last thing, if we were to consider this, what I'm doing right now is actually a flipping the classroom exercise, where I'm introducing this assignment, and so that when we get to class, everyone's already familiarized with the assignment. We can ask questions and do a deeper dive into what some of the concerns are, and just kind of explore different ways to complete the assignment. The only thing that is missing from what I'm asking you to do is that I would have to add at the end of this some sort of activity. Say I was going to do a pop quiz, where I'm asking you like, okay, which of the following are parts of the assignment, which ones are not, something like that. Okay, that would be a pretty bad one, but as an example here, then it would actually meet the criteria for what I'm asking you to do. Okay, so just wanted to kind of share that as an example with you. Okay, now the written analysis. This is what you turn into me for a grade. The following are component parts of the written analysis. This is important. The questions are meant to be encouraging and explorative. They're not meant to be each answered in full. And then I've got several different categories. The context for the lesson plan. And this context is really talking about how does it fit within even the larger school and community context, but also within the unit plan. So you've got really 3 different stages of planning, where you have a unit plan, you have a lesson set, which is 3 to 5 lessons that are usually pretty much linked together. And then you have what we're asking you to do in this class, which is just the individual unit, the single lesson plan. But I want you to articulate how this lesson plan fits within a larger context, okay? Knowledge of learners. This one might be a little difficult because we don't have actual students that you're working with, but these are all things that you really need to be considering when you have your own classroom. And it has to do with the cultural backgrounds and multiple identities and histories of your actual students. So the best teachers invariably are the ones that also know the best about their students, okay, that know the most about their students. And that's really that's probably one of the keys to being a good teacher, is just knowing your students. So therefore you can design lesson plans that meet the needs that they have, okay? This is going to be a difficult one to articulate for this, but you could at least give it a shot where you're really thinking through how you would try to do maybe some pre-assessments to understand who your learners are in order to make sure this lesson plan is meeting their needs, okay? Learning outcomes, has to do with some standards. So you should be thinking about the standards associated with your discipline and what standards this lesson is trying to meet, okay? Assessments, we talked about this, but this is you will have some sort of assessment. An assessment, sometimes you just immediately think like, oh, a graded assignment to demonstrate what they've learned, but that's only kind of half of what assessment can be. Assessment can just be, how are students thinking about this and struggling to understand something, okay? Which is most likely kind of usually what you're going to use when you're doing a standalone lesson. There's not a lot where in a standalone single lesson where you're going to deliver a certain amount of content and then test students on it, okay? And of course there's a kind of a sliding scale between summative and formative assessments. And these are terms we'll talk more about in class as well, okay? Resources, this is just, drawing on a variety of different resources that you're using. In this case, it's going to be what digital platform did you rely on, and talking about why you chose that one, okay? The lesson sequence is a step-by-step description of your lesson plan. So this would be talking about the lesson plan as an entire unit, as opposed to the flipped digital literacy lesson plan is just a component of the entire lesson sequence, okay? So what I wrote here is an important part of this lesson sequence is what you plan to do with the flipped classroom experience once students are back in the classroom together, whether that be face-to-face or virtual, okay? So the lesson sequence is really from soup to nuts the entire lesson, whereas what you're going to be sharing with students is actually probably the most important component, but it's introducing and then having them experience the asynchronous sort of flipped assignment that's associated with the lesson plan. And then the last two, we have the research rationale. I think this is where you can talk about why you have set up the lesson plan in the way that you did based on some of the research and theory that you have already done. And it's a great place to reference course readings from our course or any other outside readings from another course or anything you've done independently, okay? And then lastly, we have the lesson in review. What did an analysis of your assessments provide? I mean, I think that's going to be a really important question. You're going to get a lot of data from your students based on the assignment you gave them on the activity. And so, you should be thinking about, well, what is that telling you? Did it meet your goals? And if it did, great, what's the next step? And if it didn't, how can you kind of adapt that going forward? What type of feedback did you receive from classmates? This will be during our classroom discussion, and we'll also have some written feedback. And what would you go back and change about your lesson? And of course, also, what were the strengths that should be celebrated about this lesson, okay? And then all these bold-faced terms can be found in the glossary, that talk a little bit more specifically about these terms. So hopefully we will use this as a shared language when we are talking about these lesson plans and the experiences you have, not only presenting them but also completing them. Okay, so hopefully that gives a good overview, or at least gives you a lot of questions to ask so that you can clarify your understanding of this Flipping the Classroom digital literacy lesson and written analysis assignment. And again, this is really the backbone of the course, where you're going to be presenting this lesson plan to your peers, and you will be completing the lesson plans that your peers have created. Okay, we will talk more and talk soon. And again, thank you for your time.